Hi, and welcome to the Magnificent Misfits podcast, where we intimately explore the lives of successful misfits, delving beyond their achievements to reveal the human stories behind their triumphs. A misfit is anyone who has taken on a journey different from their peers who come from a similar background and who have dared to walk on an undiscovered path. Their stories and journey will hopefully inspire other misfits to carve their own paths. Join me, Sid, as I meet and interact with these amazing people to discuss their life stories. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Magnificent Misfits. As always, our effort is to bring you some amazing, very interesting guests who've had an interesting journey and who would classify as what we call misfits. Misfits in the sense that they are people who have chosen journeys that are different from their peers and have had a lot of fun along the way. And I'm hoping today's guest is somebody all of you will find very, very interesting, and his journey to becoming an author is going to be something that will inspire a lot of people. So my guest today is author and entrepreneur Vishnu Govind. Vishnu is the author of the recently released book, Goats Must Be Crazy, Goats as in greatest of all time. It's an account of multiple sports personalities and teams and their amazing achievements. He has very interestingly connected these accounts to lessons in business and life. Vishnu, of course, has an extremely interesting journey on his way to becoming an author. So he is an engineer by qualification who later on went on to do an MBA from IIM Calcutta, followed by a very successful stint in corporate, starting his career at Cadbury India, then going on to lead marketing at the Raymond Group as General Manager Marketing. At Raymond, he led the anchoring of the brand identity of Raymond through the Complete Man campaign that we all know of and are familiar with. Around 10 years back, Vishnu turned entrepreneur with Ad Valorem to advise leading brands and clients on how they can best unlock their strategic potential through marketing initiatives. An interesting aspect of Vishnu's personality is his passion for sports. Vishnu, from a very young age, was extremely interested in and followed multiple sports at a time when access to media, television, information about sports was a lot limited compared to today. His passion for sports led him firstly to be associated with the International Institute of Sports Management in Mumbai, and now to write this very interesting book called Goats Must Be Crazy, that I must say I have read and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And our theme for today's conversation, which is pursuing your interests while having a career. And before we start off, full disclosure, Vishnu is family to me, and we are not used to calling each other Siddharth and Vishnu. We call each other by very embarrassing nicknames, which we won't use today. But welcome, Vishnu, to the Magnificent Misfits podcast, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Siddharth. That was a very generous dose of kind words in that introduction. I would not have been this effusive while talking about myself. That being said, it's my pleasure to be here and talking to you today. I look forward to a very interesting conversation with you. And being the older one in this relationship, I can calling you Siddharth or Sid is no strange territory for me.
I'll probably take advantage of the fact that I'm a younger sibling and ask you some things that I would have probably not dared to ask you otherwise.
I'm happy just to mention you mentioned you read the book. I'm glad that you read it and you found it interesting.
Yes, it is. It is very interesting. And again, I know I'm biased, but even if I keep that bias aside, I did really find it interesting. And as I said, this is the first. I'm hoping for many more in this series. So we'll, of course, chat about the book. But for our listeners today, Vishnu, if you can start off with giving us an introduction about yourself. Maybe initially, where did you grow up? Little bit about your childhood and growing up years.
You've chosen to start with a trip down memory lane. I was born in Chennai. I spent the first 4 years of my life in Chennai and Cochin, and then we, as a family, moved to Trivandrum. So I grew up in Trivandrum, I've been there till the time I completed my graduation. So schooling I did in Trivandrum, and there are two of us, two brothers, and we both grew up in Trivandrum. And I went to the College of Engineering, Trivandrum. It used to be the only engineering college in Trivandrum those days, and it was perfect. I didn't have to leave home to pursue my engineering, and that was, I would say, a, a perfect fit, perfectly in keeping with what I wanted. Uh, the only major career decision or choice I would have made those days was probably the decision to take engineering as my stream. That is how the early days of my career went. Then after engineering, I went to Calcutta. I did my management there and then got into a job. So Trivandrum kind of is what my childhood has largely been about.
Okay, interesting. And also, if you could tell us a little bit about your interest in sports, where that started, if you remember, if you recall in your childhood or maybe later on, when that started, how that grew.
A few people very key. If you look at how it started, my brother, I think it started with my brother. He's my older brother, older by 5 years. So I remember when I was 3 or 4. I mean, he used to keep a notebook with newspaper cuttings and photographs of famous athletes. In a way, that's my very first interface with sports. So he would have pictures of Sunil Gavaskar, Imran Khan, and Bishan Singh Beri. That's how it all started. And this, we were in Cochin. And when we moved to Trivandrum, my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, had a big influence on this. So he used to be a serviceman. He was retired defense personnel at that point of time, and he used to be a very accomplished sportsman himself within the services. So there was
Okay.
some background in the family that way. My earliest instances of him following sport was while he was following the running commentary on radio, live telecast of India versus England cricket matches, 1980-81,
Wow.
Keith Fletcher's England and Gavaskar's India. And my brother would sit with him and he would explain everything, and I would also be there. And then my brother started explaining the rules of cricket to me. Those were days when visual media wasn't accessible to us. TV came to Trivandrum in 82 for
Oh,
the
wow.
Asian Games. Yeah, yeah. So a lot of my understanding of cricket is from listening on radio, uh, reading on newspaper. So naturally, it was kind of I started taking to it very easily. It was very natural. It was almost like love at first sound. When you just hear it and then you start liking. So you started following it, you started reading about it, and when you get the newspaper in the morning, you turn to the last page because it covers sports first, and somehow it all started there, and that thing stuck with me.
Okay, interesting. Interesting. And also, I mean, see, many of our listeners, I'm sure, are probably even younger to me. Okay, I mean, they're Gen Z, maybe. I think I should kind of ask you, how did you get access to information? You did mention some things about sports. What matches are happening, what games are happening. How did you kind of even get to know these matches are happening? And let's say when you became a little older, how did you watch those matches? Because I'm guessing many of these did not even maybe come on TV or radio, right? Like for example, tennis Wimbledon finals. I don't know if it came on television.
Yeah, I'll be happy to answer that question. TV came in 82, as I told you. So I remember watching the 1983 World Cup semi-finals and final from my friend's house. And it was in 86 that we bought a television set. And my tester, as a child, had a lot to do with that because it was the 86 World Cup and Maradona was at his peak. And I
Hmm.
remember that very well. So Doordarshan was the only channel for us, and there would be limited hours of sports content on television. So Wimbledon, for example, would always be there,
Hmm.
and international matches involving India, played in India, would also be there. So one of my earliest interfaces with watching live tennis was 84 Wimbledon. The
Oh
first
wow.
match I watched would be Martina Krish, final of the women's singles, and John McEnroe, Jimmy Connors,
Wow.
84. That was a one-sided annihilation of Jimmy Connors by John McEnroe, 84. So the earliest, so you were able to watch it, and then I think one media vehicle that played a huge part in my understanding of sports is the magazine called Sports Star.
Yeah.
Print media was very important in those days. And in the world of sports, there were three magazines that ruled the roost: Sports Star, Sports Week, and Sports World. And
Hmm.
I liked Sportstar. Somehow I connected with Sportstar better. And in their competitive context, Sportstar I think came out the winner in the long run. And I had a subscription which kind of started by the time I was around 9 or so, and not discontinued even once till the time I left home for my MBA. So
Oh,
we
wow.
have our when that happened, we had one cupboard full of old issues of Sportstar, which I would never allow my parents to dispose of, and they would keep questioning me, "Have you opened some of them even once?" I would still not let them do that, and should be thankful for them. The sense that they'll always encourage me and never try to keep me away from it, and I would watch whatever was there on television. I would watch, and that's the only criterion. I think we didn't get to choose much. What would I watch when I was 10 or 12? Is what is there on television. So I would watch the Santosh Trophy, I would watch the Federation Cup, I would watch the Kolkata rivalry. Those are things I saw in front of my eyes. So I took to tennis fast because Wimbledon was shown. And then once I started reading Sports Star, then developed a keen interest in a variety of sporting disciplines. So much so that you start uh, following them for the sports part of it or the competitive part of it without really understanding the rules of the game.
Hmm. And I also, through the years, were you always kind of interested in sports? Were you kind of always thinking of what can I do with sports? How can I get associated with sports in some form? Was that something that was always playing on your mind while you were going through your corporate career?
Probably no is the answer. I wasn't thinking that it was in the realms of possibility. I would have wanted
Okay.
to do it. It would be a great dream that if if that was to be fulfilled. As you know, the sports industry in India is fairly nascent, and this franchising of sports and the commercialization curve that it took in the last 10, 15 years, that wasn't the scenario way back in the 90s, early 2000s. So, whether I would be able to have a fulfilling career in sports as my mainstream breadwinning activity, uh, I did not think that it would be possible. Though I had always wanted to do this, I'd always wanted to stay linked to sports in some way. So, as a marketing professional, while managing your brand, you have various media options to promote your brand, and I always looked at sport uh, as an option which I would consider.
Yeah.
So they say that if you understand a domain well, if you have an appreciation for domain well, you feel like investing in that domain, right?
Yeah.
So whenever in my professional life as a brand manager, I had the opportunity to bring my brand closer to the sports space. Since I believed in it, I would look at it in a very positive manner. So,
Okay.
to some extent, it was there, but completely switching to sports was something that I would say it was serendipitous, and it happened much later in my career. So, ISM was one bit, and then before that, I was involved with a leading media company with working on a sports sponsorship report, and I've done it for multiple years. It
Got
continues
it.
to I continue to do so, and I was able to look at sports as a business. I was able to look at sports as an industry. So there was an opportunity that came up. I was ready to take it up. So that's how I look at it in perspective.
Okay, interesting, interesting. Okay, now I think let's switch to the book. There's like a lot. And before we jump into the book, just for the listeners, it's a very interesting book. I don't want to give away too much because I would want all of you to read it. But there are chapters in the book, and each chapter talks about a different person, personality, team, and very interesting choices. Some of them are very unconventional choices also. So I wanted to ask you, Vishnu, today in the book, right? There are of course many personalities you have spoken about. Which is your favorite chapter, or which is your favorite personality or team?
Uh, to be fair, I think when I look back at it, one or two stories were obvious choices. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you look at my attempt here was to create a team of 11 players, a GOAT 11 is what
Hmm.
I called it in the book. Uh, but the one caveat I'd like to give to someone who has not read the book is that this is not a GOAT 11 in the most conventional way you would look at it. Some of the usual suspects will not be there. Some usual suspects will be there in the sense that there will be two, three players who would make it to any GOAT 11.
Yeah.
And their inclusion will never be questioned. But then there are a few who may or may not make it, and who would be right up there in the top 10, maybe, or top 20 of all time list, but probably not the number one or two. I know in a very conventional sense. But my reason for including them in the team is because I felt the story is worth narrating, and if someone who hasn't heard about it, it's good to know, and there are some takeaways from it, be it a life lesson or be it some kind of management framework that I might have tried to uh, camouflage into the narrative a little
Yeah.
bit. Okay, so one of the names I will take is 11th player in the team of 11.
Hmm.
So, last but not the least, surely, he's 11th because he's a fast bowler, and just the optics of a team of 11 is that the best fast bowler plays at number 11. So the team starts with an opening batsman and ends with a fast bowler. There are three cricketers, so
Yeah.
only. So I'm talking about Courtney Walsh.
Yeah.
So Courtney Walsh, let's think of Courtney Walsh from a very conventional sense. Would he make an all-time list of the most feared fast bowlers in the world? He may not be the first, second, third, or fourth name that you will come up with, but he would probably come up if you take 10, 15 names.
Agree.
But he has a lot of credentials. He retired as the wicket taker with most wickets in Test cricket. He's the first to take 500 Test wickets. He's the one who went past Kapil Dev.
Yeah.
He is captain West Indies. Fast bowler captain is a rare breed. He has never shied away from bowling in the subcontinent. Some of the stalwart pacers of that era refused to come to the subcontinent. So all that being said, my real reason for including Courtney Walsh lies in one incident involving in the field, and it did not have anything about his cricketing abilities. It is more about, uh, I would say, his moral compass.
Hmm.
So, to tell that story, this was about the '87 World Cup, Reliance Cup. West Indies, those days, a force to reckon with. They had won the first two World Cups, 75 and 79. They were odds on favorite to win 83 World Cup. We know what happened on 25th June 1983 at Lords. Kapil's Devils came up trumps that day. So West Indies had to get back. They wanted to get the trophy back. There was one match which they lost badly. Walsh was responsible for that. In the last over, he had a very bad performance. There was another match, this one against Pakistan, and it came down to the very last ball of the match. Walsh could have done the run out at the non-strikers and what you call mankading.
Yeah.
Had he done that, they would have won the match. It was the last ball of the match. Pakistan needed two to win, and West Indies just needed the wicket, the 10th wicket.
Hmm.
So had he done that, they would have won it and probably qualified second from the group, faced India in the semi-finals, and avenged the 1983 loss at Bombay.
Hmm. Hmm.
So so Walsh did not do that. Okay, he gave a fair warning, and a lot of the Mankadi Act is not was a lot more frowned upon those days than
Hmm.
it is today. But still, he had his rights to run him out. There were great athletes who resorted to Mankading to get the batsman out, even in the 90s. You
Hmm.
would be blamed for a few days. The world will forget and move on. So taking his team to the semi-finals was important, but something else was more important to him. And what struck me was not the spirit of sportsmanship. Just, of course, it is there, but I think the value for values that he demonstrated was to him not a matter of convenience.
Yeah.
He did it when it was most inconvenient. We see acts of sportsmanship, batsmen being called back by the bowling captain, or a tennis player allowing the point to be replayed. All that happens. But will a tennis player do that at championship point in Wimbledon?
Yeah. Correct.
It stuck with me, and somehow this story seems to have gotten obscured amidst all the
Hmm.
news stories that have come up, and it had always stuck with me, and I'm happy that I got an opportunity to narrate it now.
That is indeed an interesting story, and I think it's a good teaser for whoever someone who's not read the book about the kind of stories you have picked up and the kind of athletes and teams you have spoken about. And as you mentioned, there are only three cricketers, so this is not just a cricket stories book. There's many
No,
many
this is
other
not.
athletes from different other sports. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. And now the next one I wanted to ask you, okay, and this is a little bit of a tricky one. You of course pick 11 stories for the book, and I'm sure as a writer you would have researched many more before you pick those 11. Can you tell us one story that didn't make it to the book, but it's still very close to you, and you feel it's a story that we all should know?
It's like what do you say, the honorable mentions.
Honorable mention, or the 12th man, or the 12th man in
12th
this
man,
case.
yeah, 12th man in this case. So, see, picking 11 is very difficult. Picking a team is very difficult. Ask Ajit Agarkar.
Yeah,
Leaving out somebody is tougher than including many others. So, and as people, fans who play games like Dream 11 on My 11 Circle, even that 11 is difficult to pick. So, you
yeah,
can imagine how difficult this would have been because I had all the sports, all time eras to pick from. So, uh, I had to be careful about having a fair mix of sporting disciplines in that,
yeah,
uh, and have Indians, have athletes from across the world. All that uh, all those were in my considerations.
yeah.
So I had the tennis is a sport that I'd always loved and I'd always connected a lot with. So I'd included one tennis player,
Yeah.
Andre Agassi.
By the way, that
Uh,
is my favorite chapter. I was thinking if I should mention it since you brought it up. Yes, that was my favorite chapter. Yes.
Glad you liked it. It is also one of my favorite chapters, other than the Walsh chapters. But as a person who wrote it, right, I had a reason for each and every chapter to be there.
Yeah.
So I liked narrating the Agassi story as well. And now, because I had included Agassi, I had to make the tough call of leaving out a tennis player
Hmm.
whom I had admired a lot, Jimmy Connors. Before mentioning about Connors, where would Courtney Walsh stand in the all-time, the pantheon of all-time greats? Somewhere up there, but not at the very top, right?
Correct. Correct.
The same holds for Agassi.
Yes.
The same holds for Jimmy Connors also.
Yes.
Now, Jimmy Connors, again, I told you a little while about him earlier. When I was the first men's match I ever watched is McEnroe versus Connors. It's a match that he lost. It was such a one-sided game. It was over in 80 minutes, 6-1, 6-1, 6-2. But I realized later in retrospect that was vintage John McEnroe.
Hmm.
So he would blow away anybody in front of him. And that was a relatively older Jimmy Connors. Through Sportstar and more recent years, through electronic media, I was able to understand a lot more about him. So in 1974, Jimmy Connors had won three of the four Grand Slams. He was,
Okay.
22 years old. He
Wow.
won Australian Open, he won Wimbledon, he won the US Open. There was a ban which prevented him from playing French Open. Who knows, he
Interesting.
might have done a calendar slam. At that point of time, people said he's the next big thing in tennis. There were people who told that he would win 10 Wimbledon titles. The
Hmm.
truth is that he had to wait 8 more years to win another Wimbledon. Okay. And the US Open, which was the one slam where he enjoyed most success at, was the only other slam that he won in the 70s. He won it once in 76 and once in 78. Okay. Uh, so, what happened in the second half of the 70s? There was the advent of Bjorn Borg.
Yeah.
uh, Charismatic, flamboyant, talented, versatile because he won on grass and clay. Bjorn Borg won five Wimbledons and six French Opens and swept everything in front of him. Uh, then John McEnroe came in the late 70s. So the tennis world was going gaga about McEnroe versus Borg. There was a movie made on that.
Yes.
So Jimmy Connors somewhere was away from the limelight. So the whole world speaking about McEnroe and Borg, Jimmy Connors would it never stopped Jimmy Connors from giving his best. He would play more number of tournaments than anybody else. He would try harder than anybody else. He would actually pick up more points on the tour than anybody else. He would win a large number of smaller tournaments more than anyone else. So
Hmm.
you would know that by the time he retired, he had won more ATP titles than anyone else,
Hmm.
109, and he had held the number one ranking on the computer for longer than anyone else, more than McEnroe, more than Borg. Borg lost steam in the early 80s, lost interest, retired. Jimmy Connors continued, in a sense, resumed the rivalry with McEnroe.
Hmm.
In '82, he won Wimbledon, beating McEnroe. He won US Open, beating Van Lendl. So he started playing with younger pros now.
Hmm.
'83, he won the US Open again. He has won US Open on three different surfaces: clay, grass, and hard court, because there was a transition phase for that tournament.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. He's the only person to do that,
Okay. I
because
wasn't aware of
70s
that.
that
Okay.
yeah, in the 70s they moved from grass. Short for a short while they tried out clay courts, and then they moved the US clay, which is not like the European clay, and
Mm-hmm.
then he moved to the current hard courts. They moved to the
Got
grass.
it.
So Jimmy Connors, you would think the 84, 85 would be the end of it, but uh, another interesting fact: at the age of 39, he reached the semifinals of his favorite tournament, US Open again. So, in terms of longevity, in terms of being the best you can be, no one beats him. Hmm? No,
Yep.
and that's a value I have huge respect for. I probably don't have it in me, but I have a huge admiration for people who show that.
Hmm.
They are like beacons for me.
Hmm.
So therefore, it's a story I would have wanted to tell in this book. Maybe some other time I'll tell it.
Wow. No, it's an amazing story. I mean, I would love to. I'll probably now go and check out after this podcast. I'm going to read more about this, but it's a very interesting story, and I don't think anybody would be aware of. I mean,
No,
people would of
no.
course know his name, but maybe not so much about his longevity and the live
Yeah,
rivalry.
he has won 8 Grand Slams,
Yeah,
more than McEnroe. McEnroe has won seven at the age of 24, and nothing after that. So things came a lot easier for John McEnroe. Jimmy Connors was not born to be a champion; he was determined to be a champion.
yeah. Wow. Okay, amazing story. Since we are on stories, Vishnu, and we are now, of course, now in cricket season, and there are many rags to riches stories that come out in the
Absolutely.
IPL, right, in India. Which is your favorite one or the one that you found fascinating? There are many. I know it's a tough one to pick, and pretty much every player has a rags to riches story.
I would take the liberty to mention more than one name.
Sure, please do.
Uh, Rinku Singh for sure stands out as a very recent story.
Hmm.
See, the IPL has kind of become a bridge. Earlier there was the international level athletes, cricketers, and then the domestic Ranji Trophy, Syed Mushtaq Ali level cricketers. Now
Yeah.
somewhere there's a level that has come in between, and the way cricket has commercialized, the T20 version is kind of becoming uh, the format with a lot of future. And you look
Yeah.
at football, for example. Okay, the primary identity of a footballer is the club team now. Which team
Correct.
does Harry Kane play for? He plays for Munich, right?
Correct.
And England comes next in your mind. Mo Salah plays for Liverpool. First
Yeah.
thing it comes to mind is, and then Egypt comes later. So similarly, a time could come when the franchise identity will be strong for a cricketer. So think of a cricketer like Sanju Samson, for example.
Yeah.
He has not become a mainstay in the Indian team. Is there in the collective somewhere, but he misses out more often than not.
Yeah.
So he is, but that hasn't stopped him from becoming the captain of a franchise team, and a good captain at that too.
Yep. Yep.
And he's kind of made his fortunes, whichever way you interpret the word fortunes, through the IPL route.
Yep.
He is definitely an IPL story. And I'll give another story. Surprising that I would take his name in the context of IPL. Indian cricket captain, current Indian cricket captain Rohit Sharma. Okay,
Hmm.
he is Team India captain. I agree, and one of the most popular cricketers in the world.
Yep.
Uh, where does he derive that huge captaincy reputation from? The five IPL titles that he has won, right?
Correct.
Isn't he, in a way, an IPL story?
Yes. Yes.
Five titles in 9 years. I mean, the most successful IPL captain from that perspective. So, IPL has made careers, IPL has made celebrities, and that's a great thing. And in my area of work today, which where I'm involved with business of sports, with ISM and in other ways, I think one good thing that we see in India is the more you win on the field, uh, your commercial successes, popularity with the masses also tend to proportionately go up. And I think uh, there is meritocracy in that sense.
Hmm.
It's a good
Okay.
thing.
Something that probably doesn't exist in many other professions and
It's
walks of life. So,
true.
yeah. Yeah.
The reason behind that is that. Sports has this game theory aspect to it, right? Suppose I'm playing against you and I'm trying to deny you victory, and
Hmm.
you're going to deny me victory, and only one of us is going to win. See, Alcaraz is a great player. Uh, Yannick Sinner is also a great player.
Yeah.
So if it is Sinner versus Alcaraz at the French Open finals,
Yeah.
we know that one will lose, right?
Yep. 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 Yep.
Now you compare that to a Bollywood release. There is a
Hmm.
Shah Rukh release and a Salman release on the same day. I mean, there will be a lot of verdicts. There will be a lot of comments being made. Both movies will collect. One might collect more than the other, but there will always be arguments and counter arguments as to which is the better movie without a definitive verdict being placed.
Correct. Correct.
There is the who ended up the winner will always be obfuscated by many detailing.
Yep.
So
Yep.
sports therefore has a effect of an equalizer, a leveler, and
Yep.
it is brutal, but that's what makes sports interesting also.
Okay, that is very interesting. And again, just a quick reminder to the listeners, right? Many such interesting stories in the book. Please do kind of read. Slightly switching tracks now, Vishnu. Want to understand more about your writing. So your process of becoming an author, right? How did that happen? And also, I'm trying to understand. You had a very successful career in marketing and leadership roles. What kind of experiences did you pick from there while you kind of decided to take upon this journey of becoming a writer and author? So that would be very interesting to know.
In terms of how I managed to think of this, embarking upon this journey of being a writer,
Yeah.
so I think the sports being the topic, you know,
Hmm.
it became a lot easier for me over the years since I started working uh, on matters related to the sports industry.
Yeah.
Whether it is as a faculty or consultant at IASM, or whether it is working on the industry side of the business of sports,
Yeah.
it kind of brought me a little closer to the sports space, and I was involved in works involving writing in a certain way. There was certain kind of content creation element in what I did, and therefore, the venturing out into being an author had a certain kind of seamlessness about it. I Sports always connected with me in a certain way, and I've told you about the early days also. It
Yeah.
kind of they kind of stick with you, and I believe that sports can tell you stories for the reasons we just spoke about a little while back.
Yeah.
Sports can be a great educator also,
Yep.
and like those old fables that we read, there is a moral in the story always, and that's a kind of construct I've
So
given to
on
it.
that, I want to
So
interrupt you and ask you, are your role models all sport or mostly sports personalities? Is that something that you have noticed?
it is true, and it is not something I've tried to do deliberately.
Hmm.
So a lot of sports stars, sports heroes connect with me, and I tend to follow them. Even at a time when I didn't understand their sports so well, their journeys caught my attention.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, sorry, please continue. I interrupted you.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. So one of the things is really that if you want to start something, and I knew that it was a challenging thing to do this because you had to piece a lot of things together, and it is not. And in anything, any venture that you do, you should have uh, you have to create your product, and at the same time you have to take your product to the market. And today you have to look at both things, and from that perspective. Uh, Piecing the content together was one part, and I realized that I had to focus on my strengths. What are the stories that I will be able to tell? In what way I'll be able to tell? So I think one of the learnings from my work life, which I kind of brought into this, is that I figured out where are the areas where I could tell a nice story. Which way can I tell a nice story? If I want to communicate uh, something about management frameworks or life lessons, I can better do it through certain stories. And I try to adopt that. And, there are many times when you feel that when you get inundated with other pressures, work pressures, and all that, and then
yeah.
you may start questioning. And at that point, you just kind of, I go back to the starting point and ask myself, why did I start in the first? place.
Yeah.
That kind of gives you the strength to restart and re-energize and move on. One thing I realized in the course of this is that uh, there is no one size fits all for this. If
Yeah.
will I write, will I drag, spread it out over, will I do it word by word, sentence by sentence, uh, day after day, week after week, or will I pack it all together in a short span of time? I
Yeah.
realized that for me to make it work, I had to do my first draft quickly. So there was a lot of
Got it.
thinking process. The thinking process might have been longer. Which story to pick, like a selector picking his team, I would
Yeah.
have taken time in that. But once I started writing, I knew that the first draft had to happen fast,
Hmm.
and which is the most difficult thing. The first draft is the most difficult thing for me. So that happened very fast. I must say this. I listened to a Sudhamurthy interview actually, in which
Okay.
I don't remember which one of those interviews. She actually said that when I want to write, I shut all the noise off and concentrate for 2 3 weeks and write a book.
Mm-hmm.
So, which made me think that yeah, maybe it's possible. That's how you should try. And
Hmm.
therefore, I managed to get a lion's share of my content out on the when I started putting pen to paper, I was able to get a lion's share of the content out there, and then
Got it.
it became about optimizing the same. So that's one. So my wife kept I kept discussing with her. I mean, she could push me and encourage me do this and think about the next step later. So take it one
Hmm.
step at a time. So control the controllables and ignore the ignorables is
Okay.
what you should do, and focus on what you're good at and what things that can work better for you. So what works for you is what you should do. What works for someone else is what he or she should do. So,
Got it. Okay, interesting. So, two things at least I took away. One is know yourself and your strengths, and play around that. That is clearly one. And the second is I think it's important to get the first draft or first version of what you're working on out, however bad or good it may be,
yeah,
and
yeah,
then
yeah,
then
yeah.
keep going from there. Now, the next one, Vishnu, is so as you know, this podcast is called the Magnificent Misfits podcast. Would you consider yourself to be a misfit compared to your peers, and why would you consider yourself to be a misfit?
Okay, so before answering that, I must commend you. It's a good name. I
Okay.
really like the nomenclature. It's a great oxymoron.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So on the one hand, you call someone a misfit, and
Yeah.
even as he's smarting under the bruised ego, you're calling him magnificent also.
Yep.
So it's a nice, it's a nice way. So if you ask me the question that you asked, to
Yep.
answer it directly, yes is the answer. Because if you look at the path I've taken, the journeys I've taken, uh, not everything has been conventional.
Yep.
To a certain extent, I followed the path that you would call conventional. When do you use the word misfit? When you're not fitting into a template. That's when you call yourself a misfit, right?
Correct.
So maybe some of the earlier days of my career, which I would call the learning days, I've probably not been a misfit. I've followed the rules of the game in a so to speak. But then for me, as I told you, I integrated sports into my workspace,
Yeah.
and which is not something that uh, is commonly seen in a template, and therefore
Hmm.
I would wear that misfit term with a badge of honor.
Okay. We now have a very interesting section, Vishnu. So it's called shorts. So what
Okay, okay,
shorts is I'll like post a statement or a question to you.
okay,
You'll have an agree disagree choice. You'll have to
okay,
pick one, and you'll have to
okay.
in one line or a few words explain why you picked that. So that's the idea. So I'll start off. Okay. So the first one, right? If you have a deep interest or passion for something, it keeps coming back to you even if you're not working on it. Agree or disagree?
Agree, and I would add a point. It will probably never leave you. That is what I really think, and it will stick with you. So, in my case, say it is sports. Somewhere it plays a role in shaping your personality, also.
Yeah.
I believe, and it will influence you. In my case, many things. Okay, like uh, like my familiarity with spoken Hindi
Mm-hmm.
comes from listening to television commentary in Hindi.
Oh, really? Okay.
My comfort with numbers come from all those countless hypothetical scenarios of run rates and asking rates and averages which I used to play in my mind as a child.
Oh,
I
wow.
believe so. Yeah, so I think those things are there. So yeah, I agree with that thing. They will never really leave you.
Wow, okay. I was not aware of the numbers part. I mean, okay, that's very interesting. Okay. Second one, okay, this is more related to sports persons. Sports
Okay,
persons through their relatively short careers experience ups and downs that common people may not experience in a lifetime. Agree or disagree?
agree totally. I think we spoke about that a little earlier
Yeah.
in a sense because a defeat is a defeat, and there are no two ways of speaking about that.
Yeah.
And in other walks of life, uh, there are obfuscations. You can say that maybe on one condition, on one criteria, it was good, but it failed on the other criterion, and all that you can say. But in sports, it's cruel in the sense that you lose many times, and there are no two ways about it. So I'll tell you. Haven't you heard of Rahul Dravid's quote? Uh, More often than not, he has failed to get a start in an innings. Let's take
Yeah.
Sachin's example, the greatest. Uh, Test cricket, 51 centuries, 68 half centuries,
Yeah.
119 out of 329 times he has stepped out to bat.
Yeah.
He has failed to reach 50.
Yeah.
Failure to reach 50 is what I would call a failure for someone like Sachin, right? So
Yeah.
what? Little over one third of the times he has scored a 50. Every other occasion he has failed. So Michael Jordan would have missed a game-winning throw countless number of occasions.
Yeah.
So it is not the number of zeros and ducks and single-digit scores that a batter makes that define you. It's probably the those few high points that define you.
Okay. Next one. It is possible to pursue your interests or hobbies while having a full-time job or a career. Agree or disagree?
I've seen a lot of people struggle with this
Mm-hmm.
uh, when you when you do busy jobs, which really take up a lot of your time. But I've seen that it works when the hobby or interest kind of becomes part of your lifestyle. So if you're a blogger, then you blog, or if you like running, or if you're a marathoner and you run 4 marathons in a year, then you do that. So it takes some commitment to be able to do that,
How about
especially.
how about author or writer? Would you say is that something that you can do while somebody has a full-time job?
I think it is something that is possible
Mm.
because you would normally write on topics that you relate to, right?
Yeah.
And if it is related somewhat to your area of work, or if there are some things that you extract from that, uh, then it is possible, I would say. But again, it takes commitment, and it's a project, right? You need to see through it, and
Yeah.
in some way, the essentials of your life are taken care of by your job. So staying committed to the other side of your personality is it involves certain amount of commitment also.
The next one. Writing is extremely tough, even if it is on a topic you're greatly interested in. Agree or disagree? Now, I didn't plan for this question to come right after this answer of yours, but it adds up.
Okay, I think writing is very tough. So there are people who write well, there are people who talk well, and there are people who
Hmm.
do both well. But I think when you are talking, right, then you have a certain way with words, and
Yeah.
you can go around in a way without taking a clear stand on a matter.
Yeah.
Who is going to win tomorrow? A is good, but then you can never rule out B. And then
Hmm.
there are certain intonations, uh, the way you play with the way you utter it. You have those flexibilities. Your expressions are not there when you write, right? You
Yeah.
have to commit to your opinion on word, and you have to take a stand. It's like a 4 point scale.
Yeah.
You can't take the middle path.
Yeah.
So I think when you're writing, it pushes you to take a stand on a matter.
Okay, interesting. No, that is true. That is very true. It's kind of like the analogy you gave earlier with being a sports person, right? You are
Yeah, yeah,
it's binary. You either say something or
yes,
you write something or don't. There's no like you win or you lose. There's nothing in between. So
Yes, and it is always going to be there.
yeah.
It is there as proof that you said it once.
Now the next one, I want you to wear your put on your hat of faculty member at ISM. Okay, so and
Okay,
this is an
okay.
interesting field also. So the question is, making a career in sports management is a lot easier today than 2 decades back. Agree or disagree? And you can take more than one line to explain this if you, I mean, this is a very interesting topic.
Sports industry has evolved a lot in India. So
Yeah,
when IPL 2008 kind of it was like a watershed year for sports in India, and since then it has been a upward curve. Other sports have borrowed the IPL framework. Now there is a Pro Kabaddi League. There's the Indian Super League in football, and there are other sports. So, franchising and commercialization of sports has now created an ecosystem of athletes, teams, sponsors, investors, media, and there are jobs right across the sports value chain today.
yeah,
Organizing sports, broadcasting it, analyzing it, monetizing it.
yeah,
So, it is a lot easier. So you see, certain industries, first the industry evolves, and then education for that industry also follows suit.
yeah,
So fashion, I keep thinking, I'd worked in fashion industry for some time, right? So fashion evolves, and then you have the NIFTs and all booming. Hmm?
yeah,
So you look at India, an economy which is built on manufacturing. Hmm?
yeah.
We had engineering colleges mushrooming earlier.
Correct, correct.
So somewhere that is going to happen. So sports management and there is now a stream called sports management education, and IASM has been a revelation in that sense. So Nilesh Kulkarni, who founded the institute, and my interactions with him have been truly eye opening, and it's been a very inspiring journey. And being able to collaborate with that team has also helped me in my own way to make a difference to the next generation. So I'm truly thankful for that.
Okay, next one. Now, this is, I don't know if you would agree or disagree with this, but I'll still put it to you. Individual sports are a lot tougher mentally than team sports. Agree or disagree?
Yeah, I will agree. Because you have nowhere to hide, right? Uh,
Hmm.
I'm reminded of a comment which Dhoni made recently. Maybe I saw it recently. You would have made that comment earlier. I don't know how old that video is. Cricket is a very lonely sport, he says. It's a team game, but it's a lonely sport. Because when you're
Hmm.
batting, there are only it's the batter versus the bowler.
Yep.
And when you're bowling, the fielders are away from you. It's one versus one. So you literally have nowhere to hide. The
Yep.
rubber meets the road. In a football game, as you keep moving the ball around, it's a complete team sport.
Yep.
Uh, you have each other, except maybe in a spot kick scenario. So mentally, you need to be a lot stronger, and I think there are people who are cut out for that mentally, who would relish being an individual athlete. And
Hmm.
even in team sports, I think there are athletes who do their role very well.
Hmm.
And in fact, one of the chapters in the book is about individual brilliance lifting the team,
Yes.
and
Yes.
certain individuals are born with that responsibility, I think.
The next one, okay. And I know that you've met quite a few sporting figures, personalities through the process of launching this book as well. Who's the most inspiring sporting figure you've met in life? And I know you've met quite a few of them by now.
I would like to take a couple of names.
Sure.
Um, Sachin Tendulkar, surely,
Yeah.
the greatest, as we discussed, he's spoken of as the greatest batter. Maybe then Leander Paes.
Okay, the next one is inspiring sporting figure you would like to meet. You have not met yet, would like to meet.
Okay, okay. So there are these names I've covered in this book for sure, but
Yeah.
I told you I could not write uh, about Jimmy Connors.
Yeah.
There's another tennis player. Uh, I had not planned to cover him in this book because a lot of people know his story too well. Uh, so he's Rafael Nadal,
Yeah.
the man who dislodged Roger Federer when Roger Federer was at his peak.
Hmm.
So the 2008 Wimbledon final would probably to be one of the greatest matches for me. So truly admire him and like him. Uh, Maybe this is the heart speaking and not the brain speaking, but
Yep.
he's the one I want to meet.
I usually ask my guests which is their favorite book that inspires them. In your case, I'll ask you favorite book, and I'll also ask you a favorite book in the context of sports. Let's say a sports
Okay.
biography or
Okay.
something of
Okay.
that sort. So both.
So To Kill a Mockingbird.
Yes.
Okay. I had not read it when I was in college and all, and later on in my when I was doing my MBA, and there was this subject in which we had to analyze certain books, and I got some other book, but I knew that there was a group which was working on To Kill a Mockingbird, and I was very touched by some of the narratives they were having, and I made it a point to read it. And great, it was truly inspiring.
Okay, and what about a book that's related to sports, a sports biography or something like that? Which one would be your favorite?
The earliest sports biography I read was Sunny Days by Gavaskar, and I think the second was Greatest, Muhammad Ali's Greatest, and I think I had uh, the second one which I mentioned, Muhammad Ali. So kind of tells you a lot about that person. You know more about him beyond his credentials as a boxer. His stand he took on Vietnam, matters that matter a lot to him, and it tells you a lot about the individual. So there was always this aura or fascination about Ali being the greatest, and I've always wondered why he is the greatest and why the word greatest fits very well with him somehow
Hmm.
in popular sports parlance. And this book again, which I read many years ago, had kind of made me realize who he is. And as a sports biography, I think there's been a book that has touched me in a certain way.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so now the last question, which is related to a movie that you find inspiring.
Okay.
Again, I would say firstly a general one, and then maybe a sports biopic or sports related movie. But there's a bunch of choices you will have on that or preferences.
Sports wise, there would be a lot actually.
Yeah.
And I will again take the liberty to mention more than one name. Race, if you know the movie Jesse Owens.
Yes.
So the movie Race is about the challenges faced by Jesse Owens as he was preparing for the Berlin Olympics and what he faced at the Berlin Olympics. Jesse Owens is the person whom I heard about it when I was following Carl Lewis because Carl Lewis equaled what Jesse Owens did, four
Hmm.
goals. And I think the same events also. 84 Olympics, Louis equaled the four gold feat of Jesse Owens in 1936. There was one incident in 1936,
Hmm.
and it is there in the movie
Hmm.
about and it was a long jump, and he was under so much pressure because Hitler was watching, and the whole racial issues that were surrounding the event. And in the long jump prelims, he overstepped because of the fact that he was agitated. Hmm?
Hmm.
He overstepped the mark on the first two attempts, and he had only one attempt left to qualify. So one German athlete walked up to him and told him, "Look, you would easily meet the qualifying distance. Why don't you go a few inches back and take your leap from there?
Hmm.
Don't come this close to your mark. You are anyway going to qualify
Hmm.
because you're the best jumper in the field, and you have a lot of time to get ready for the finals."
Hmm.
So he did that, and the athlete and Owens qualified for the final and won the gold later. The
Hmm.
athlete who told that was Luz Long, a German athlete, right under Hitler's eyes,
Interesting.
and Luz Long won the silver.
Oh, wow.
It's a great
Okay.
story of friendship, genuine friendship, which was formed then. And that and many other aspects to that story is a very inspiring story. And there are other sports stories. Invictus,
Yep.
the rugby as a vehicle to energize a nation. In India, surely Bhag Milka Bhag would feature in my list.
Yep.
Uh, Sports business, sports finance, sports management, Moneyball would be a movie that I would
Moneyball. Very
definitely
interesting.
mention.
Yes.
Yeah, Brad Pitt and Jonah Hill,
Yeah.
inspired by true stories. So
Yeah. Yeah.
very much.
Okay. So I think we are at the end of the list of things I wanted to ask you for today, Vishnu. This has been a really engaging conversation, some amazing stories, your own story of how you turned writer, author now, and also stories that you have covered in your book and even outside of the book. I'm sure that people who listen to this episode today are going to find many of these stories and this conversation enriching, and then they will go and check out the book. It's called Goats Must Be Crazy by Vishnu Govind. It's available. I got it on Amazon. I'm sure it's available widely now. Sorry, I would encourage all of you to go and read this book. Very engaging read, and it's a lot of interesting stories that I'm sure all of us can take something away with us from. So thank you, Vishnu, for making time today for this conversation.
Thank you, Siddharth. The pleasure is all mine. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and I really enjoyed, especially given that this is the topic that we spoke about. And I'm glad that you were resonating with some of the thoughts that I shared today. And I'm sure that this podcast will go places, and in future, as more and more people start following it, they'll go back to the chapters. They'll go back to the chapter that we recorded today also, and uh, wishing continued success for this initiative.
Yes. Thank you so much for your kind words, Vishnu. So that was today's episode. Before I wrap up, I want to take a moment to express my gratitude to you for tuning in. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, I'd like to ask for your help in spreading the word about the podcast. If you think there's someone in your life who might enjoy listening to the Magnificent Misfits podcast, please consider sharing it with them. Also, if you're active on social media, we'd love for you to give us a shout out and tag us at MN Podcast Show. That's MN Podcast Show. Thank you and see you soon.